Good afternoon and welcome everyone to our science career panel. We're so happy to have all of you here today. I'm Jeremy Hyman, Science and Technology Success Specialist at NCC's Center for Career Development. We're so glad to have all of you from our NCC students, local high school students, other prospective students, as well as a number of NCC faculty and staff, including a couple of our science faculty members who taught some of these illustrious alumni when they were students here, as well as some of my colleagues from our Center for Career Development. I'd also like to welcome Zachary Cruz from our admissions office. He'll be available as part of our Q&A at the end if any audience members who are prospective students may have any admissions questions about our programs. And without further ado, we have a really exciting packed agenda today with a number of awesome speakers. So I'd like to move forward here with introducing our esteemed panelists. Before we hear from our main science alumni career panelists, we're going to start out hearing from our outstanding inaugural STEM Dean. And then after that, we'll hear from a set of 8 NCC alumni in the sciences, as well as a special guest alum from neighboring Lehigh. So first, let's pass it along to our esteemed inaugural STEM Dean, Dr. Farah Banani. Farah, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Hyman. My name is Farah Banani. I am the inaugural STEM Dean at the college. It is my privilege and pleasure to introduce each one of you and be with you. So Dr. Hyman did an amazing job in selecting who will be speaking today. So I'm giving the floor to each one of you, and at the end, I will share what I have studied. So you are our guests. You go first. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Farah. We really appreciate that. We're excited. We'll be excited then to hear from you as our closer then, after we hear from everyone here. So you can see our lineup here, and we'll just move right along. So first we have we'll be hearing from Teal Wyckoff, who is an associate research scientist and technical services manager at the University of Wyoming. Teal, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here to introduce myself. So I am a graduate from NCC from the Monroe campus. I graduated from there in 2004. And I just wanted to give a little bit of background kind of about myself and where I fit in the science mix. I have an associate's degree in general studies from NCC. And then I decided after that that I did actually want to go on and get a bachelor's degree. And I also decided that I was interested in moving from Pennsylvania out west. And so I came to the University of Wyoming. And I proceeded to get a dual major undergraduate degree in environment and natural resources and geography, where my emphasis was on physical geography. About 1 year into that degree, I got a job at a place called the Wyoming Geographic Information Science Center, which is a research center at the University of Wyoming. So I would say I was a non-traditional student throughout my whole career. I would say that let's see, so I graduated from high school by getting my GED at the age of 19. I was actually homeschooled, got a GED, came to NCC. NCC was definitely a really foundational component of me deciding what I wanted to do with a career and where I wanted to go. It was during my time at NCC that I decided that heading in an environmental science direction was what I wanted to do. And then when I came out, I moved to Wyoming and I continued that. So I have wound up in an interesting career path, I would say. I was a non-traditional student, as I mentioned. I graduated with my bachelor's degree at the age of 27 and was already a couple years in at that time to working at this research center where I still am about, 15 years later, I think I'm still here. And it decided along that path that I also wanted to pursue a master's degree. And so I also did that while working full-time, of course. I, on the side, got a master's degree in zoology and physiology, working with what's called the Wyoming Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit. We are a USGS or US Geological Survey research unit. And in our state, we actually serve as the research arm for our Wyoming Game and Fish Department. So we really serve our state in that capacity. For me, my career has I have really been able to meld a couple of different areas of science. So you'll recall I mentioned that my original interest was environmental science, and I would say that that has been true. I have been able to carry a thread of the environment throughout my career. But the research center where I now work is actually a GIS center, Geographic Information Systems. Now, I work at a university that is a land grant institution. So in that capacity, we have a pretty strong outreach and support role for our state. And you might be interested to know as well that we are actually the only four-year institution in our whole state. And what that means is, we have a lot to contribute. And my role in my center where I work is actually in so I am a research scientist and I do have some of my own research program, but a big component of what I do is actually in working with the state, a lot of state agencies, federal agencies, NGOs or non-governmental organizations and others to help them make informed decisions. So I work in a world of a lot of data, a lot of geospatial data, and really serve as a middle ground between bringing in data and information and understanding the role of science, be that in environmental science, social science, whatever it may be. Translating that, we develop a lot of what are called online map applications or decision support tools. And then we develop those tools in order to support an agency such as the Game and Fish Department, the Wyoming DEQ. I work with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is a federal entity that are under the Department of Agriculture, and really support them in how they make decisions about resources. So one example might be wildlife. Of course, that's an area of expertise for me, is in understanding wildlife, particularly wildlife migration. And so really my realm is definitely science-based, but also communications and technology. So thank you for this opportunity to be here. I'm excited.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much, Teal. That was wonderful. We really appreciate your sharing. I apologize. I was remiss before in giving a brief overview just of the rest of our kind of time frame for today. We'll hear for about 4 to 5 minutes from each of our esteemed panelists, as you're seeing about their paths, highlights, challenges, advice, exciting projects they've worked on, and any other parts of their journey that they wish to share. And as I put in the chat, you can enter questions into the chat box at any time, and we'll have some time at the end to ask questions. And you'll also have opportunities to connect with our panelists moving forward after this. So after the session. So moving right along, we'll go to Leslie Wubbel next, who is the founder and CEO of a really exciting new firm called OpenVessel. Leslie, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Leslie Wubbel. I'm actually an alum of NCC at Monroe. I started back in 2016, going to 2017 with my degree in biotechnology. And I attended Penn State. I transferred out to Penn State main campus as biotechnologist and completed my 4-year degree from there. And then rounding out there, I began a company with a group of friends and engineers and data scientists, and I lead a company known as OpenVessel, which we process medical CT imagery and apply AI as computer vision on top of that data to help with detection of maybe like nodules in lungs or livers and various cancers and things like that. So what I mostly do from a non-scientific perspective is that I am its CEO and more of coach for a lot of my guys, is that day in, day out, I'm keeping track of the project. I'm kind of encouraging them what they need to do to deliver results, communicate the results correctly, and all that fun stuff. So I read through a couple of the questions here, and I would just like to share. You know, one of the questions I read here said about passion, what you want to do passionately. For me here, it was mostly imagination and building a company and having a vision for that was really important. That's a really important tool, is that knowing what you want to build from beginning to start and then budgeting that out, because it's easier to explain what you're trying to accomplish throughout the whole part. So it's really having the space on an idea that you can explore and just dump hours into like really enjoying something and like collecting data, or if it's programming and pulling these tools together. And then the fourth question, I think it was, don't be afraid to reach out. Always email professors. You know, if you really want a job, email those people at key positions and get your face in front of theirs. That's really a key thing. Trust me, as an employer, I had several interns under me that I have to train and get them to use some of the technologies at Penn State, like their supercomputer. You know, some of the guys I picked out, they really, you know, took the extra time to send that email, and that stuck out to me, or, you know, explain what they're passionate about. So it's really important to know that they really want to be part of this from employing someone on that perspective. And then fifth thing is, I think if I could go back in time and really tell myself something, it's you want to listen more. Listening is such an important skill. Taking your time, understand what your engineers are saying. Do not go ahead and just rush a project. Clearly explain steps and ask questions too. You know, ask them, how does something work? Because even though they might understand how something works from their side, asking a question on that topic really helps build that product and that deliverable. At the end of the day, what we mostly do at our firm is that we do consulting. So we just engineer customized solutions like Jupyter notebooks, Python, and all that. Yeah, and you guys mentioned non-traditional route. Yeah, I'm zigzagging on these lanes a lot. So I started in wet labs like biology and genetics and proteins, and a lot of those labs, they really need a lot of help with data. They collect hundreds, terabytes, and you just got to know how to kind of process that and help them with their results. So it's important to really know what your customer is doing, what they value, and how you enhance that. So that's it about for me. Just like to pass it on and say thank you for inviting me. I appreciate that a lot, Jeremy. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Leslie. And I think it's really exciting to have Leslie here talking about this in terms of, I think that, you know, for some of our students in the audience, the idea of, you know, graduating, moving along, and then right off the bat as you're a senior in college and afterwards starting your own firm and really kind of following that passion and applying it as you have is really, I think it's really kind of eye-opening. So thank you. We appreciate that. Leslie.
Yeah. Last thing I forgot, push yourself outside of your comfort zone. If you're comfortable doing something wrong, gotta push yourself out there. Yeah. It's a lot of growth there. So thank you. Yeah, appreciate that.
Thanks, Leslie. So we'll move right along. Next up, we have Cameron Feathers, who keeps very busy in that she's been working now for a number of years as a pharmaceutical engineer at Perkin-Elmer, and she's also an immunology and microbiology PhD candidate at Drexel University. So Cameron, over to you.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's really nice to see everybody. It's kind of amazing, actually, how many paths we have that are very similar, very parallel. We don't really know of each other until all of a sudden there's all these connections. So anyway, so I am Cameron Feathers. I was a graduate of NCC in 2012 for the biotechnology program. So I was a little bit of a hybrid. I was one of the experimental students when they started the biotechnology program over at the main campus in Bethlehem. And then we became the wayward children that nobody wanted for a little while they were finishing up the Monroe campus. So I started out in the old campus, which was terrible. We couldn't drink the water. And we had lots of opportunities to explore the coliforms in the water. And then we moved to the new campus, and I was only there for one semester and we were done. So anyway, so I was there, and then I went to Lehigh University as a biology major. And at Lehigh, I ended up finding out the first life lesson that I think college life had to teach me, which is never turn down anything. I started out as a biology major, and I ended up being given the opportunity to join a lab on the Mountaintop campus, Swan Lab, and that led to me changing my degree and my path into behavioral neuroscience. I did not continue my path in behavioral neuroscience. I actually switched back to biology and ended up with a dual degree, mostly because I've had a lot of filler classes in anthropology, but that led to me having a lot of unique career choices as I moved forward. That diversified opportunity actually led to me getting my foot in the door as a master's student over at Drexel University And that's where I ended up with a master's degree in immunology. And a lot of my research from the Dr. Swan lab and another individual, Joe Brogg, led to some publications and some writings that I was able to participate in and be a co-author on. And that is ultimately what kicked off my career with Perkin-Elmer. So I started out wanting to be, vet science or possibly go as an MD, and I ended up in a pharmaceutical research field and, ultimately ended up as now a PhD candidate at Drexel. So one of the cool things that I noticed amongst all of these merging paths is that if you never say no to an opportunity, it ends up opening doors that you didn't even know existed. And a lot of times we have a very narrow focus. We have this idea of what success is. And if we keep that in mind and we never take the blinders off, you have a tendency to let the world pass you. But if you take the blinders off every once in a while, not for too long, because you want to stay focused and moving forward, but if you take the blinders off every once in a while, you end up seeing sideways paths that might have more potential than the path that you're currently on. So for my particular story, that led to me becoming part of a SARS-CoV-2 research panel and investigational mRNA study, where we were investigationally mapping out mRNA sequences. This ultimately led to being part of an entire panel for QA for a brand new experimental research drug that a lot of people are talking about a lot right now. So, basically don't ever sell yourself short. Just because an opportunity looks like it's a sideways movement rather than a forward movement doesn't necessarily mean that it is. Obviously, there's a lot of opportunities that, sometimes are not open for everybody, but ultimately, if you keep your eyes open and you pay attention to what's going on around you and learn to shift and pivot as the world shifts and pivots, it opens up a lot of doors that you don't know exist. And I think that that's important as we continue to move forward as a society. I think that too much stagnation, too much straight trajectory forward, you don't really get that diverse, branching out. And, where we are right now is a brave new world with technology, with immunology. I personally never really saw myself as a career in immunology, but here I am. And a lot of the future of immunology has to do with stem cell research and a lot of the stuff that I cut my teeth on at Northampton. And, it all kind of comes back to that biotechnology degree, which is looking more and more like the future of immunology. This is where it's headed. So it's no longer, sneeze into this tissue and let me analyze your snot or, something like that. It's actually a lot more in the lab. It's a lot more technical, a lot more genetic mapping, a lot more biotechnology, nanotechnology. There's a lot more imaging that uses genetic models and very few things that use hypotheticals anymore. So that's kind of the future of our medicine in general. And I think that that's an important thing to remember is that, every opportunity that presents itself, well, it's not going to sit there and say, hello, my name is opportunity A. It's going to often present itself as a roadblock that you can't think your way around. And that roadblock turns out to be your career path. So, just, I guess in closing, always keep your eyes open. Just because it's a roadblock doesn't mean it's a career ender. Sometimes it means a career pivot.
Thank you, Cameron. That was really powerful. I think we can all take quite a bit from what you just shared. Thanks so much, and thank you for all of the work that you've been doing, and certainly including but not limited to your work here with SARS-CoV-19. So thank you. Moving right along here, we're going to pass the mic next to Dan Fleming, who's a lead analytic technician at Lubrizol Life Science and a very dear friend of the college. He's also made some really crucial connections supporting our Center for Career Development and current students. So off to you, Dan.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Cameron. Very well said. A lot of really, really wise points there. And it reminded me of the old saying, smooth waters never made a master sailor. But onto my own spiel here. I just wanted to say good evening, everybody. My name is Daniel Fleming. I'm an NCC alumni since 2014. I'm currently the lead analytical technician at Lubrizol Life Sciences Contract Development and Manufacturing Organization, or just the CDMO division. We're a local pharmaceutical contract development and drug product manufacturing organization, which I will get to towards the end of my little shtick here. But initially, I'd like to take a couple of minutes to briefly discuss my non-traditional path that I took to my job. And then at the end, what I like about it, and then how we impact today's world. So I had started out as an engineering student. I was mildly humbled, as many of the students at the time were, by Professor Magilton's General Chemistry 1 class. Really enjoyed the challenge, and I really enjoyed the content. So I was an engineering student with with some Gen Chem and Organic Chem as my electives. Had a wonderful time in that. My last semester at Northampton Community College, I was contacted, didn't expect it at all, saying that I was graduating with a chemistry degree. And I was like, wow, can't believe it. Didn't realize how close the two curriculum were. At that point, I signed up for my last engineering class. It was a calc course, and I had some time as a part-time student then to decide, where's my career going to go? And how am I going to get there? So at that point, I took some time, I thought about it, and it was a really appropriate time. I enlisted in the Marine Corps, as that was a dream of mine to become a Marine. And then everybody knows that the military is going to help you pay for your college based on your military career, right? So I served the country as a combat engineer. I graduated as the academic high from the only school that produces combat engineers. Served the country, saw the world, learned a ton, ended up coming back, right? And I was accepted to Penn State University's main campus. Went up there. A little bit of a tragedy hit when my parents ended up splitting, and my siblings stuck with my mother, and our father, who was a six-figure salary. He left the house, so I had to withdraw from my courses and start looking for work right away with an associate's degree and some life experience. And that's when I came into my current position at Lubrizol. It was formerly Particle Sciences. I applied for a position there. There were 80 applicants to the entry-level technician position available. Out of those 80 applicants, I got one of the two positions that were offered. And within that year, I distinguished myself in my efforts. I had a title change to lead analytical technician, which involved the training of several employees on their onboarding program. That went really well, so I contribute a little bit more. I was in charge of a surprisingly large amount of instruments in our department, and then I was also involved in the training of any of the new onboarding technicians and their training while they moved on in their career path. So after that, I had a little time to reflect, and I saw that from 2014, I had graduated as a college student with an associate's, and I moved on, became a United States Marine, moved on, became a Penn State University student, and then had to come back home. And now I'm an integral part of a contract drug development company by the year 2021. It was a little bit interesting, not quite as linear as I had initially anticipated, but that's life, and that seems to be how college is working. But from this point on, I'd like to talk about how our company very briefly affects today. We're a division of Lubrizol, and we've historically been very strong in researching and developing new types of drug delivery methods, as well as release rate control methods. We've increased longevity of active pharmaceutical ingredients based on what they're being carried in. We've been really strong in STD prevention and birth control, and more recently have equipped ourselves with the capabilities to handle a complete development phase, as well as the characterization and the manufacturing of any of the products that we actually make, right? It was a huge surprise when, I made our first compounds, which I tested and I proved, this is what it is. And it was really cool. Really, it's a strange feeling to know that you made something and then it's exactly as intended, relatively close out of college. It's exactly what it's supposed to be, as strong as it's supposed to be, doing what it's supposed to be, and it's as pure as it's supposed to be. It was really cool. And after that, I had some time again to think, and I realized that there's a lot that goes into this field. With all the background of all the different things that we do in the pharmaceutical field, it brings me to one of my favorite things about what we do. and that's that there's an unreal amount of knowledge that you can gain in the management of the processes, as well as the operation of your equipment, the reporting of data generated on what you or your company made, and everything in between there. That means there's a ton to learn for everybody, and there's a ton of options that work for what is reasonably for almost anybody. So it's a really diverse field to get into. One last thing that I'd like to say before I hand the mic off here, another benefit of working in the pharmaceutical field, if you like helping people, even if you'll never meet them in your life, which is often the case, it's a fantastic field to get into. Once COVID, for example, came into prominence here in America, while I was at Lubrizol, we all felt that like we could have done something to help the COVID footprint on both the corporate and the local level. So when it really started affecting our nation in early 2020, we as a company were able to assist in the production of hand sanitizers, among other things, while still maintaining our current studies to help mitigate COVID's impact. It's always great to help out with stuff like that. Really good to see it, especially locally. And with that said, that ends my portion of the panel. So I'd really like to appreciate the time and everybody listening. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Dan. I appreciate you coming back to that point of nonlinearity and some of what you just described there in terms of really being able to impact people in society, even if it feels indirect at times. Certainly touches home for me quite a bit in terms of why I initially went into the sciences. And I won't be discussing my very weird and nonlinear path today through chemistry into STEM ed, but I really appreciate your comments. Thank you so much. So next, we're going to be moving right along to Kate Rodriguez, who is a research technician at TruCapSol and has also been a really dear friend of our Center for Career Development, including one of her former interns is even here today. So Kate, pass the mic off to you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kate Rodriguez. I'm a research technician for a small research lab here in Allentown named TruCapSol. I started at NCC, graduated in 2015. I studied biology and biotechnology. And then I moved on to Lehigh to study biochemistry and computer science to learn more in bioinformatics. So my background is definitely in bio, but so I'm fascinated with the human body and living things. That's my passion. But now I'm working with polymers. So that has been a challenge for me because sometimes I find it boring. I'm working with plastics in comparison to working with living things. So that has been a challenge for me to feel motivated at times, but I really love what I do because I think of the grand scheme of things, we're trying to make these microcapsules biodegradable. And that's so important because if we're going to live on this planet, we got to try to live sustainably and make sure that we are, protecting it for a better future. So that kind of motivates me. So some of the work I do is basically performance and analytical testing, along with data analytics. So I'm still using my bio background. I'm still using the computer science I've learned at Lehigh, but that's pretty much what I do. Speaking of non-traditional students, I'm definitely non-traditional. I started Lehigh, I think in 2016, and not only am I a Puerto Rican woman, but I also have 2 children. I think my daughters were 5 months old and 2 years old when I started Lehigh, so very non-traditional. So I think my advice to the students is that, sometimes life throws you curveballs, but you don't give up. You don't give up, and you follow, just go with the flow. The part of it is the journey. I always say that it's the journey, and along that journey, you're gonna learn about yourself. You're gonna learn about what you enjoy doing, and you might not end up where you thought you'd end up. You might end up someplace better. So, from my experience, I've learned that I had a goal in mind. I loved bio and I studied bio and everything, but I really love my job. I love what I do, and I just feel absolutely blessed. So it's part of the journey. Don't sell yourself short or feel lousy if things don't go as planned, or if you're an older student, or if whatever the circumstance may be, because you might end up really loving what you do in the end.
Thanks so much, Kate, for sharing a tidbit of your journey. Kate's being very humble, as she always is. We really appreciate what you've shared there today. Thanks so much. So moving right along here, we're going to pass the mic next to Brice, who is a field engineer at Repligen and has a lot of interesting and really intriguing things to share. So Davis, passing it off to you now.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brice. I currently work as a field engineer for Repligen. They are a fast-growing bioprocessing biotechnology company. I actually did not go to Northampton Community College. I'm originally from Miami, Florida, and I matriculated into Lehigh University from a first year all the way to a fourth year, where I graduated with my behavioral neuroscience degree. After that, I didn't go straight into work. I stayed around and I got my Master's of Engineering degree from our mechanical engineering department, concentrating in technical entrepreneurship. This was an interdisciplinary program that allowed students from various facets, majors, different types of studies, and it teaches them a fiscal business approach to any type of idea that can really cater to solving a customer need. And as we know, there are infinite amounts of customer needs and there are infinite solutions. So that was kind of like my educational background. Now that I work in the pharmaceutical industry, I basically travel around to quite a few places: Merck, GSK, Pfizer, Sanofi, Novartis, you name it. And I perform qualification testing on the PLC systems of their bioreactors. So I work on ATF systems, TFF systems. So these are tangential flow apparatus machines so these pharmaceutical companies, in order to do their research, they need a lot of cells. So they'll start off with a small amount of cells, and they slowly scale up until they have large vats of these cells. And in order to do that, they need to filter out what the cells are suspended in. We call that the retentate and permeate. And I work on the configuration systems that control pH, viscosity, and all of these things. So not only am I providing the documentation necessary for FDA audits and all of these things, I'm also working on the ground with the customer and really helping them cater their machine to their project. It's kind of tailed of custom kind of work where each machine and each project is different, and the customer will have different needs in terms of yield and what they would like to get out. This might not sound like English, but as a whole, Repligen, we work on the process flow of macromolecules. So this includes gene therapy technologies using vector plasmids, ligands, adeno-associated viruses, lentiviruses, and our machines use shear forces as a method of filtering out cells from their suspended trypsin or whatever they're suspended in to kind of keep them alive while they propagate and grow. So you're going from a small amount to a huge amount. So when you're scaling that much, there are a lot of documentation. There are a lot of SOPs, standard operating procedures that must be followed in order to make sure that the end product that's, can get injected into an elderly person, a newborn, so that whoever is receiving it is receiving a quality product. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of where my career took me. I would consider myself a traditional student, as I went to a four-year institution and I, applied from high school, got in, and then did the 4 years and then did the master's. But one of the greatest pieces of advice that I can give, especially to the first generation students who are currently going to Northampton Community College, is that when you do spread your wings and go to pursue that bachelor's degree, to pay very close attention to the financial piece of it. When you're signing promissory notes, really making sure you understand what that encompasses, and really making sure that if you can pay for it yourself, try to, and only take out what you absolutely need in any type of loans. As you know, Compounding interest is never fun. And it doesn't really matter how much you're making in the end, because none of that money is actually yours until you have a zero net worth. So really, really value that, because if you don't have, grandparents or family who are willing to pay your way for you, just be cautious of the financial piece of, pursuing an education, because I do believe education is important. However, I do also believe that financial literacy is even more important. And if you can avoid a debt avalanche preemptively and still get that same end result, I think that's the best piece of advice I can give, especially to young people who are currently in the community college, where you're not burdened by such a heavy amount of fiscal loans. And I think it's actually very smart that you guys are starting off at community college and really taking advantage of the resource to really get those general education requirements in. As someone who received a large financial aid package to attend Lehigh, I was very lucky. However, I do know people who, paid full boat, didn't necessarily major in STEM, and they're really facing the repercussions today. So yes, career is good. Pharmaceuticals is great. Follow your passions, follow the science, but also follow the dollars, follow the Excel spreadsheet, follow that table, because at the end of the day, you're signing your future income over to however much you're deciding to take. So it's not always like a happy rainbow, but you just have to be cognizant, like, okay, I'm taking out these loans, I got to repay it. You have to eliminate in your mind that it'll be forgiven, and you just have to put yourself in a mind state that you're going to repay it. Don't hold your breath that it'll get forgiven, because if that's the case, you'll be, drowning in interest by the time you can even blink. All right, so that's about, I know I kind of went off the rails in for a bit, but I would try to be, really give some practical advice, because as a professional now, I'm almost halfway done with paying my loans, and I'm finally making enough money where I can make large payments and it's not really a problem for me. But I didn't get to that point until 2.5 years after I graduated from my master's. My first couple of salaries weren't competitive to the point where I could make large lump payments immediately. So I know this is all about the journey and all of these things, and I don't want to dampen anyone's spirits. I just want to have the students know that the importance of how legitimate, when you sign on for something like a loan, how you're actually, that's attached to you now. It's a part of you now. And you have to be very cautious, especially to the students of color who do not have that backbone to fall on, who don't have that safety net. When you're looking at those promissory notes and you're making those signatures, you need to ask yourself, you need to come up with a plan, and you need to make sure that when you're out of the gate, whether you have a job lined up or not, you have a plan to tackle that debt. All right, that's about it for me. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Davis, and definitely don't feel like you are all off the rails. This is all a conversation about the journey, about the paths, and about the genuine advice you have to give. And so we really appreciate your being real with the group here about about your path and your insights there. So thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And we're gonna go move right along now to our next panel. So I wish we could have more time to kind of converse in between, but we want to afford enough time for each of our panelists to speak, and then to have some time for a back and forth with the Q&A. So we're going to pass it along next to Emily Morales, who is a clinical documentation integration specialist. I hope I got that right, and a former infectious disease PA at the Lehigh Valley Health Network. So Emily, passing it along to you.
Okay, lots of interesting stuff. Cameron Feathers, I would love to know her. Okay, so I'm going to talk really fast because I have a lot, but my name is Emily Morales. I'm PAC. That's a physician assistant certified. I graduated from the Sales University PA program in 2007. I think I'm an alum from NCC from 2004, so I'm one of the older ones. I don't even remember. But after passing my medical boards, which is why I'm certified, I immediately accepted a job at Lehigh Valley Hospital Infectious Diseases Department. And the role of a PA, I'm not sure how much you're all familiar with PAs, but we're essentially an extension of the physician. It can be outpatient or inpatient. I did both, but but I was predominantly inpatient. I would start with a census full of patients that I had to see that day, and on my own, I'd go and I examine, interpret results, order. I would discuss with family, with nurses, with other providers in the care of those patients. But there is an attending physician that oversees you, and you discuss the care plans with them. And they may or may not go see those same patients that day. They may or may not agree with your plan, but you know, the longer you work with them, the more you're on the same wavelength. So they will go with your plans eventually. But you know, physicians now have a lot on their plate, so they do have come to rely on the PAs to get those patients seen. There's truly a lot of autonomy in this role. So I myself worked with ID for 12 years, and I loved it. ID is just fascinating, it's challenging, it's very intellectually stimulating. I was there for the Zika outbreak, the threat of Ebola, and among other things. But I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of glad that I was gone before COVID, because I do talk to some of my PA colleagues, and you know, they're really exhausted. They really are, and that's just it. Hospitals, they don't close. The job is very demanding. There's long hours, there's weekends, there are holidays. And I was an adult learner. I started late in my PA career. I have 3 daughters. And being older, I felt like I was at a point in my life where I can scale back. So, however, again, I did love it. It's very rewarding. It's very fulfilling. Finding that hard diagnosis and having patients and their families be so grateful that you helped them. It's a feeling of pride and accomplishment, so I highly recommend it. I just celebrated my first year in the current position I'm in as CDI specialist. That's Clinical Documentation Integrity Specialist. It's a mouthful, but I now go through medical charts via computer, and in order to pick up diagnosis to code and bill. Now that sounds like a coder, but it's not. Wording is super important, because if it's not documented properly, then they're just not going to pay. And being on the other side, you know, working long hours and sacrificing, the last thing you want to hear from your employer is that, you know, I'm sorry, we can't give you a raise this year because we've lost money. So as an experienced provider, I can understand what that provider's document is trying to get across. So I help educate in proper documentation, so we can do that. And of course, we also look for, you know, fraudulent documentation as well. And so that's where I am today. I now have the flexibility that I wanted. And that's the beauty of being a PA. Unlike a physician who has to kind of get stuck in the discipline that they're in, I have the luxury of moving on. And, you know, if I wanted to go from ID to derm or surgery, I could have done that. So like I said, I started my education later in life. I was a single mother with a small child. I worked full time. I went to nights and weekends. A PA degree is like 5-6 year max master's degree. And it literally, I think overall took me over 10 years, but I did it. I didn't give up. I met Elba Carides from Student Services, who was absolutely instrumental in getting me through it. I initially started in general studies, and after meeting a mentor, I decided on the PA degree. So Elba got me on the biological science track. So it was very intense, a lot of learning while trying to provide and raise my daughter. It was very hard. And then I think I went to Elba constantly to just complain. She was amazing. But the professors were equally amazing. They always had the time for you. And they basically said, what do you need from me to help you to succeed? So like, who was it? It was Leslie Wubbel said, you know, don't be afraid to communicate, to ask. I encourage you to seek out those in the student services, make them your best friend because they're willing to help. They want you to be successful, but you have to ask. And my path was also nowhere clear cut or easy. I went, I stopped, I went again. I had a second daughter. I even changed my major to interior design. So I was thinking, but then I got back on track, and then I finally graduated. And I think it was like 4 or 5 years before I finally did. But when it was time to transfer, I went to the sales. The credits transferred very smoothly, and the tracks are good that way. So while I was at the sales, I never once felt like I wasn't prepared or that I felt lost in their science track. In fact, many times I had better grades than some of those that started the first year. And I definitely felt like I had a good education at NCC. So I leave you with this. I just wish you all the luck in your educational goals. You can do it, never give up. If you need a breather, take that breather, but just come back and communicate. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Emily. We really appreciate you sharing that. And we know that a lot of our biological sciences students are considering, different possible paths, in medicine and healthcare. And I think, and having your story and and your path included here and your advice is really, really, critical. So thanks so much. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Going to move along next to Noah Weaver. I will just preface by saying that for the most part, we've tried to stick to individuals who've already who've been out of NCC for at least a few years and have kind of launched their careers a bit past NCC. However, since Noah has been a dear friend to our career development office and has been involved in so many things in his short time out of school that we really wanted to include him here. So he's at Lehigh, where he's been a global social impact fellow, mountaintop fellow, research assistant in neuroscience and bioengineering, and a molecular bio student. So Noah, passing the mic along to you.
Thank you, Jeremy. So I think I'll start out with my story, I guess, because, as much of a mouthful as all my accomplishments might be on paper, I don't want that to intimidate anyone because I was like many of you in the audience at one point. I'll share with you. Going to high school, going in my senior year, I had about a 2.1 GPA, and I ended up. I had a lot of difficulties dealing with personal circumstances. I had a father who was succumbed to drug and alcohol abuse, unfortunately, but I did have a wonderful mother who helped me as much as she could. And I ended up kind of falling into retail management. I was a retail manager by the time I was 18, and I did it because I had to do what I had to do to make ends meet, and that's really what it comes down to. One day I got to the point where I disliked my job so much, I'd look at the building and I'd feel physically nauseous because of how much I disliked my job. And that's when I knew it was time to move on. So I ended up quitting my job when they tried taking away pay from me. It was the best thing that ended up happening to me because I quit on the spot and I said, I'm out, handed over my keys and left. And it worked out for me. I did a lot at NCC, including I was the president of the Student Senate while I was there. I was fortunate enough to have many mentors look out for me, and I eventually got a scholarship to go to Lehigh. It was a nearly full scholarship, and for that I'm grateful. And it all started at Northampton Community College. When I transferred, a lot of people kind of look at you like you have three heads, like you're from planet Mars or something when you tell them that you're from community college, because it is very rare to be from a community college at one of the elite schools, right? However, though, it's also the degree that I'm most proud of out of any degree that I'll ever earn. I can tell you my NCC degree is the most proud degree that I have because it didn't come with any attachments, any promises or guarantees or anything. And I share all that with you because, when I got to Lehigh, I struggled immensely my first semester. I got a D for the first time in a class. And I got a C in another class, and it wasn't because the academics were more challenging. Honestly, I thought the academics were more or less similar in rigor from what I had in the biological science department at NCC, but it was really the environment because I faced a lot of discrimination when I first transferred. I was told by about 20 or so professors no when I tried to find research in a lab. And I've had multiple professors flat out question my qualifications for no other reason than I came from a community college. I've had another professor flat out tell me to my face, nothing you learned at a community college would have prepared you for my lab. Well, luckily I ended up finding a professor who was willing to listen, and I'm now working in the lab of Dr. Sabrina Jedlicka, and her lab focuses on using what are called single-walled carbon nanotubes to increase the yield of cells that are undifferentiated cells into becoming neurons. And my project specifically focuses on osteoblasts, which are bone-forming cells. Or bone-forming precursors. Anyway, since I've been at Lehigh, I think the biggest skill that I've learned is how to self-advocate. I don't take no for an answer. If you want to do something, you really have to just go in with a mindset. You're going to figure it out, and that's it. I can't tell you how many times I've been told no. As much of a cliche as it sounds, you are going to have a lot of people that tell you you can't succeed based on the facts that you came from a community college, and because a lot of people think that people choose community college because they're failures, when that's so far from the truth. It's unbelievable. A lot of people choose community college because they have no other options in life. Maybe you have family responsibilities, maybe you have work responsibilities, what have you. And I think above all that, for me, what I'm mostly passionate about is pairing my skills with social advocacy and social justice initiatives. So, for example, some of the work I do as a Global Social Impacts Fellow is focused on lowering the maternal mortality rate in Sierra Leone, West Africa, which is the most impoverished country on earth. They're in West Africa, but anyway, I'll share a link with you guys that can explain a little bit more about that. But I've been very fortunate to make sure the cornerstone of what I do is I'm always serving the needs of others, is particularly those who can't help themselves, because I know what it's like to be that person. So I encourage each of you to find something that not only that you're passionate about and something that you can make money off of, but something that gives you a reason to wake up every day. Because just a few years ago, I did not have that. I can't even put into words how much I didn't like my job. And now I'm working more hours than ever, but I have more energy than ever because I absolutely love what I do every single day, and it keeps me going. That's all I've got. I'll drop a couple things off in the Slack, or in the chat. Sorry, meant to say Slack for a second.
Thanks so much. No, we really appreciate that. Excellent points there, and great to hear about your work. So we're going to move right along to our final of the panelists before we hear a little bit more from Farah. So I'm going to pass it along to Lee, who is a vector control program leader and water quality study co-leader for Monroe County. So Lee, on to you.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Oh my gosh, all of you like impressed me so much. I don't even know what to say now. I feel like it's a hard to follow everyone, but I appreciated everything that all of you talked about, and it was awesome. And I relate to Noah a lot, actually, because I was a retail manager for 15 years, actually, before I went back to school, and I was a later return student, and I was in my 30s, and I decided I just hated my retail job, and I couldn't feel good about what I was doing, and I felt like maybe I had more to offer this world, and I just wanted to try to help people in some way, and I didn't really even know what that way was. So I went back to NCC, and I started off as a allied health major, and I thought maybe nursing or sonography, or because that's what they kind of tell. They is just kind of everybody, I guess, but tell people that, women who are older, who are going back, that's a, good plan. You're going to start off with a great salary and go with that. But, and then I met John Leiser, who, he turned into a mentor for me and a very good friend. And I just knew that I kind of didn't want to go in that direction. So I went towards biology, and I loved it. And I transferred to ESU and went toward environmental science, and I loved water quality. I loved micro. I was really interested in mycology most of all, but ESU offered no mycology. So I found another mentor who is the publisher of a mushroom journal in Chicago, and he mentored me for 8 years through mycology. And now I'm a certified mushroom expert in the state of Pennsylvania, and I write, now I owe him for mentoring me for so long. So I write a culinary column for his journal every few months. But that's kind of how I got into everything I'm doing. Like the mycology is really my passion. I really love micro. The vector control is what pays my bills and gives me benefits, and it's a government job, and it's solid. And I have been a single mother the whole time I was in school. I had a small child and was working a bunch of part-time jobs and trying to get through it all. And halfway through, I almost didn't make it, and I thought I might quit. My GPA totally sucked all through ESU. But I came out and had the job from a former lab student a former lab partner was leaving Monroe County and said, "Hey, I think you might do good at this job," even though I had never really looked at insects before. And now I do insect-borne disease control. So I totally landed there by accident also. I'm also a part-time sushi chef. And I also give guided hikes and mushroom ID classes and all kinds of weird stuff like that. I have severe ADHD, which probably for most people is a huge issue trying to go through college and focus on something. But instead, I like to focus on like 10 things at a time and do all of them. So that's another thing too. So I just, you know, as an older return student and as someone with ADHD, I feel like if you're just really passionate about what you want to do, volunteer as much as you can and just be active in whatever kind of community it is that you want to be involved in. And you get to know people and they see what you can do. And, you know, I was pretty well welcomed around here into the environmental community. So I feel like NCC was a huge step for me. So I don't have much more than that, I don't think. But thank you so much for having me here. You guys are also impressive.
Thank you, Lee. I mean, don't underestimate, you know, your own story and journey as well. We really appreciate it. And I mean, I actually got to first meet you when I heard Lee speak in one of Professor Leiser's classes last year, just before the pandemic. So thank you so much. So, you know, once again, we really appreciate, you know, first of all, certainly the audience for coming out, and we're going to have some time for some Q&A, but we want to have some time to hear as well from our STEM Dean, Dr. Farah Benani. But thanks so much to each and every one of our 9 panelists. I think there's just a lot of really phenomenal points, advice, inspirational journeys, practical info about specific career fields that's been shared. So I'm going to pass the baton along to Dean Benani, and then for those of you with questions, you know, keep them coming. I know that some of the questions have already been addressed by some of the panelists as we've been going along. And once again, I think Zachary Cruz from admissions might be heading off soon, but he's dropped his information into the box for our high school students and other prospective students who are present. So we'll pass it along to Dean Benani. And I'll also say that for those of you with additional questions that haven't been answered yet, certainly we'll give you the chance to unmute yourselves after Dean Benani speaks as well. And we want to be respectful of everyone's time, such that if anyone does have to leave right at 6 o'clock hour, we totally understand that. And thank you so much for coming. And we are recording this event, and we'll share the recording with all of our audience members and panelists if they want them as well. And it'll be up on our YouTube page. But I'd still like to, you know, hear some comments from Dean Benani, and we'll be, you know, and then we'll have some Q&A before we head out. And thank you, everyone. So Dean Benani, passing the baton back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Heyman. Wow, I feel honored and pleased to hear each one of your stories, and I'm very pleased to hear about NCC impact and all the professors. So the fun thing about each one of you speaking, all of us, including me, we have something in common. So Dr. Heyman, this should have been a biology career panel, because everyone almost has started with biology. So I'm the new STEM Dean, and I want to be brief in terms of just sharing with you my career and what I have studied. So I started first grade when I was 4. I studied overseas. So I have an accent, as you can tell. I speak 6 languages. My entire study was in a French European program for that. So by the age of not even 11, during 6th grade, first science class, and each one of you are where you are because one of your professors have impacted you, whether in high school or at the college. I am grateful for my science teacher. We went over I remembered human skeleton. And I came back home, and during dinner time, my parents asking me, so how was the first day? And I said, I want to be a scientist, like Miss Benjeloun. I still remember her name. So I finished high school, and at that time was to be computer science specialist. So I went and I studied computer science. I am an analyst programmer. I finished all of this, and I'm not even 20. I was offered the job, but I'm like, I'm too young. I don't want to study. I don't want to work. So then I remember I always loved biology. So I enrolled at the university. I studied my animal biology bachelor. My major is immunology. I studied neuroscience for an entire year. For my graduate level studies, I have done research on obesity, diabetes, atherosclerosis, and treatment with the plant endemic in the south of Morocco. And then for my PhD is in microbiology, and I have held patents for my research. I came in the US in 2000, and I have been in academia since 2001, teaching, developing, and doing research now, which is a passion for me, now combining what I do with computer science as well as with biology, and developing anything that has to do with curriculum. I'm guessing many of you in this call or in this Zoom are gamer. I am a gamer too, but the only difference, I use Oculus, I use holograms for curriculum development. So I do a lot with artificial intelligence, with virtual reality and mixed reality. I publish both overseas and here. Given the advantage that I have with the languages, I know and I read what's going on in the world, and it is my passion to share what I know with my students. I teach across the biology, nutrition, and languages. I'll be teaching, for those of you on the call, I'll be teaching next fall semester. So if you need help with any biology course, please do reach out to me. My office is in the Copytech building and room is 240. So I will put my email at the end. The best advice I can give each one of you and all of you, even now in your job, and I'm sure you know this, follow your passion. My parents always wanted me to be an MD, and I know my limits. And I'm like, no, parents, I love you, but I want to be doing something with research and microbiology. As of right now, I hate being in the hospital, but I don't have any problem working with human blood and cell culture and everything that each one of you have shared in your job. I have done it and I love doing it. Be open-minded, be curious, but at the meantime, know your limit. And as Leslie mentioned, step outside of your comfort zone, because that's where everything can happen. Do not say no, as many of you have said, but also be mindful in terms of how you will approach things. It's a learning process, it's a journey. It was my dream to finish and have my PhD before the age of 30, and I made sure I had it at 28. I am proud of this, but something that I'm passionate and what I do with my students, given I am a female and I am a minority, I am a big advocate for the inclusion and diversity and the rightful presence of minority in the field of STEM. Today is the second month. I just finished the second month being here. So my plan is to work with Dr. Hyman and everyone, and Jerry, I know she's in the Zoom, and every one of you. I will be reaching out to you, panelists, how we can collaborate, how we can do better pathways for our students. The only advice, if I have to change one thing in my life, I will go back and learn the American instead of the British, because I learned British when I was in high school. So thank you so much for giving me the floor, and it's a pleasure, and I'll stay here and answer any question you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean Benani, greatly appreciated. So I know there's been a steady stream of questions coming in. It's been hard to keep track of all of them with a long thread here, but if anyone who still has any questions they'd like to add to ask to one or more of our panelists, I think it's probably easiest right now if you just unmute yourself and just ask it and go right ahead, because there's been a whole slurry of them coming through. I know it's hard to keep track of which ones were already answered one-on-one. So feel free, anyone who's in the audience who has a question, just to reach out, and we'll take it from there. And yeah, we'll see if these questions come up. Go ahead. Yes, Elaine, good to see you. Go ahead.
Hi, nice to meet you again, Hyman. I'm glad that everybody shared their stories and stuff. Firstly, I loved all y'all questions, but I am limited on time myself, actually. But I'll start off by asking Mr. Wubbel, Leslie. I was interested in you because you run a business while you also have all these biology degrees. I think that's really interesting. I'm interested in entrepreneurship in addition to biology. So I was wondering, what's that like?
Oh, it's hard. It's you're challenged every day on a personal level and on level. You know, it's really, you have to fight for your perspective. And Noah mentioned earlier, self-advocating is really important. Everyone will doubt you at every single step. Your family will doubt you. Your teachers will doubt you. And it's really being persistent and honest about it. It comes with a level of consistency. There's a thing with leaders that are they're particularly stubborn, like your boss is stubborn. you need to be just as stubborn. But leaders are just more than telling people what you should do. It's really maintaining these relationships between a group of people and exceeding on a project. I'm ranting, so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but there's a lot to it, and you know, it's hard sometimes. Like, there's so many ideas that pop up, and the first idea that you think in your head is a good idea, right? But from a business perspective, you always have to concern yourself about the customer's perspective. You need to imagine yourself in their shoes. You need to listen and understand what their problem is, because it's there, but it's hidden in a way. Like, you need to really understand what they value. So it's a little bit reading in between the lines. And and going back to standing up for yourself, you'll be offered some deals that you need to walk away from because they're just bad for you. They might value your service at a lower price, and they might think like, oh, they'll take this, but you need to actually evaluate yourself higher, because in the game of economics and capitalism, you're evaluating your value and your worth, and there's a lot of politics included about it. I'm a middle of the road man because I have to balance a lot of people's perspective if they're liberals or if they're conservatives. So yeah, that's what it takes, is really pulling people together and saying like, this is the goal and we're going to get this done. And yeah, persistence is key. That's all I got for you. You gotta don't take no for an answer. If you're really about it, get it done. Just do it. Don't let no excuse get in your way. And that's all I got.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Yeah.
No, you answered
problem.
my question, and I'm glad you answered it in such a way.
It can be a lot. So yeah.
I'll let somebody else ask a question.
All right. Thanks so much for that question, Eleni, and Leslie, for your answer there. As I said in the chat, we'll stay on for one or two more questions, and then we'll wrap things up out of respect for everyone's time. And I definitely encourage everyone, we'll be following up with the recording, and our panelists are very kindly, available to connect further, via LinkedIn or email. They've given me permission to share their emails with you, so you can do that with any of those, who interest you. We've seen that be very fruitful for some further career chats from some of our prior panels. So any other questions here before we wrap up this evening? And Jacob, yeah, I can share that with you actually in my follow-up email, or they can share them with you now. Thank you for that. Any other final lingering questions from anyone who's still in the audience here? All right. Well, I want to take this opportunity once again to thank everyone for coming out and looking. I saw some really great conversations brewing even within the chat here, and I'm excited to in anticipation there will be a lot of further connections coming out of this between our students, alumni, panelists, etc. So thanks so much to all of you, to each of our panelists, our alumni, guest panelists, to our Dean, Dr. Farah Benani, and to everyone else who's come here this evening. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening and rest of your week. A great spring break to our current students who are in the audience, abbreviated as it may be. And I will be in touch with all of you who attended here this evening with a follow-up to share the recording, and a thank you to our panelists. So all the best, everyone. Take care.
Can I ask something really quick while we're leaving?
Sure.
Dr.
Sure.
Benani?
Yes.
One thing at the end of your address right now, and you said something at the end. You said the one thing that you wish you would have learned, and I missed what you said. So
learn American instead of British, because my plan was to go to the UK after my PhD and